You already sense it. Though you avoid naming it because naming would force decision, you feel that your words have begun to weigh more than they should. That each explanation you offer lands with diminishing effect. That the room does not lean toward you as it once might have. Nothing dramatic has happened. No single betrayal. No clear defeat. It is quieter than that. It is the subtle realization that presence alone no longer shifts the atmosphere. And so you compensate with clarity, with politeness, with context. You tell yourself this is maturity. You call it transparency. But beneath the language you use to soothe yourself is a simpler recognition. You are increasingly visible and increasingly ignorable at the same time. When this happens, people speak more. They think more speech will restore gravity. They do not notice that gravity retreats from motion, is not silence. I have watched this pattern repeat across centuries. Men and women believe decline announces itself with noise. But it arrives without sound. It is felt first as a pressure to justify. When you sense that pressure, you are already late to understand it. You may tell yourself that the world has become faster, that attention is fractured, that everyone is misunderstood. These explanations are comforting because they distribute responsibility outward. They also make you predictable. What you avoid naming is that value is not argued into existence. It is inferred, and inference collapses when you overexpose the mechanism. There is a moral story you have been taught, one that flatters your self-image. It says that clarity is virtue, that openness is strength, that being understood is the same as being respected. This story was useful to someone, but not to you. It trained you to narrate yourself continuously, as if your interior needed public maintenance. You learned to preempt suspicion by volunteering motive, to soften friction by explaining intent, to manage impressions by smoothing every edge before it could cut. You tell yourself this makes you reasonable. What it truly makes you is legible, and legibility is not power. It is convenience for others. In Florence, I learned early that the most dangerous men were not cruel, but coherent. They explained themselves so completely that no space remained for fear or speculation. Their enemies did not need to guess. They only needed patience. I watched men collapse under certainty, their lives arranged so neatly that anyone could anticipate the next move. They believed they were protected by being known. They were wrong. Being known is exposure without drama. It invites adjustment by others. You are adjusted around without noticing when this happens. It feels like cooperation. It is not. You live inside narratives that reward predictability. You are praised for being accessible, for being responsive, for being easy to read. Each compliment trains you further. You become available on demand, emotionally and intellectually. When something is always available, its value is calculated downward. This is not cruelty. It is arithmetic. Yet you resist this conclusion because it offends your moral training. You want to believe that generosity compounds. That explanation builds trust. That presence earns loyalty. Sometimes it does. More often, it establishes a pattern of extraction. Consider a small daily scene. You send a message that requires no urgency. Yet you watch for the reply. When the reply does not arrive, you feel a faint agitation. You draft a follow-up, then restrain yourself. Then send it anyway with a polite qualifier. You tell yourself you are being efficient. The reframing you avoid is that you have just announced your availability as surplus. The other person may not notice consciously, but the balance has shifted. You have removed pressure from the exchange by absorbing it yourself. The year you inhabit intensifies this pattern. 2026 is not dramatic in its cruelty. It is exhausting in its density. There is constant evaluation without formal judgment. Endless comparison without declared competition. People live inside overlapping markets of attention. approval, and anxiety. The result is a soft coercion. Respond quickly. Explain clearly. Align visibly. No one commands this. It emerges. You feel it when silence is interpreted as absence, when delay is read as disrespect, when restraint is mistaken for confusion. The pressure is not to act, but to clarify. Clarification becomes a form of obedience. Economically, socially, psychologically, you are surrounded by systems that reward immediacy. Delay is suspicious. Ambiguity is pathologized. To hesitate is to risk misinterpretation, and misinterpretation is treated as guilt. You internalize this logic and begin to manage yourself preemptively. You speak before you are asked. You explain before you are challenged. You fill space before it can be used against you. This feels prudent. It is in fact submission to a tempo that is not yours. Obedience today rarely wears uniform. It wears reason. Approval seeking is reframed as collaboration. Guilt conditioning disguises itself as empathy. You learn to anticipate discomfort in others and remove it before it appears. You call this kindness. The mechanism beneath is simpler. You are avoiding friction because friction might cost you belonging. Over time, the avoidance becomes reflex. You cannot tell when you are choosing and when you are complying. The fear of misinterpretation keeps you verbose. You would rather be exhausted than misunderstood. This is how dependence on reassurance is built. You require feedback to know where you stand, because you no longer stand anywhere privately. I have seen this before. In courts and councils, those who explained themselves most thoroughly were rarely those with the most influence. Influence belonged to those whose motives could not be easily diagrammed, not because they were deceptive, but because they were restrained. They allowed others to approach them cautiously. Caution creates distance. Distance creates value. You have been taught to close distance at all costs. You have been told that silence is arrogance, that absence is neglect, that withholding is manipulation. These accusations are effective because they sound ethical. They also keep you available. Power, as it actually operates, is quieter than your education prepared you for. It is not asserted, it is assumed. It moves through perception, not proclamation. Timing matters more than content. Selective absence speaks more clearly than presence. Controlled access defines importance. Silence, when it is not reactive, generates gravity. Patience outlasts force, because force exhausts itself. None of this requires hostility. It requires restraint. Restraint is not inaction. It is deliberate non-response. Observe a simple reversal. The person who always answers first is rarely the one whose answer settles the matter. The one who waits absorbs more information. Another reversal. The one who explains least is often credited with deeper understanding. Silence invites projection. Projection magnifies presence. A third. Those who are hardest to reach are assumed to be most occupied with important things, even when they are not. Perception fills gaps more efficiently than truth ever could. You pay a cost for passivity that you prefer not to calculate. Options narrow quietly. You feel it when opportunities are offered with conditions already attached, when invitations arrive late or not at all, when decisions are made in rooms you are informed about afterward. Internally, something sharper develops. Contempt for your own compliance. You notice it in fleeting moments. A tightening when you hear yourself over-explain. A fatigue after you. Smooth. Yet another edge. Reputations drift without announcement. People stop checking your reaction before acting. Leverage disappears, not because it was taken, but because it was never claimed. There is a way back that does not require announcement. Strategic repositioning begins internally. It starts with restoring self-command, not through assertion, but through reduction. You delay responses that do not require immediacy. You control access to your time without justification. You reduce explanation to what is structurally necessary. Each act feels small. Together, they reintroduce friction into exchanges that had become effortless for others. Friction is not conflict. It is resistance to being shaped without consent. Watch another daily pattern. You are asked a question that assumes your agreement. In the past, you would clarify your position immediately, offering context to soften refusal. Now you pause. You allow the assumption to hang. The reframing is subtle. You are not rejecting. You are refusing to rush alignment. The other person adjusts. They always do. Adjustment is the true indicator of value. I learned long ago that denial of access is more effective than confrontation. When you argue, you enter the other's frame. When you withhold, you force recalibration. This is not cruelty. It is economy. You conserve energy. You let others spend theirs interpreting you. Over time, they attribute intention to your restraint. Intention is weight. The internal action I leave you with is precise. Within 7 days, choose one channel through which you habitually over-explain messages. Meetings, conversations, and remove one layer of clarification you normally provide. Do not announce the change. Do not compensate elsewhere. Measure the discomfort privately, and do not relieve it. Once done, it cannot be undone, because you will have learned how much silence you can survive, and how much adjustment others will make when you do not speak. The first sensation you will notice is not empowerment. It is exposure. Silence removes the scaffolding you have relied on to feel acceptable. When you stop filling space, you become aware of how often space was never hostile to begin with. You had been preemptively negotiating with ghosts. This realization is uncomfortable because it suggests that much of your effort was unnecessary. And unnecessary effort is a form of self-betrayal. You will be tempted to correct this discomfort by speaking again. By restoring the familiar rhythm, resist that temptation. What you are feeling is the recalibration of attention, both yours and theirs. There is another moral fiction that will surface quickly. It will whisper that restraint is dishonest, that withholding explanation is a kind of lie. This fiction confuses truth with disclosure. Truth does not require full access. It requires coherence. In Florence, I observed men who told no lies and yet revealed almost nothing. They were not admired for their ethics. They were respected for their density. Others had to work to understand them. Work generates investment. Investment generates loyalty of a far more durable kind than friendliness ever does. A daily pattern reveals this clearly. You enter a room, physical or symbolic, and you feel the impulse to orient others. You summarize where you stand, what you are thinking, what you intend. You do this to be efficient. The reframing is that you are removing the need for others to observe you. Observation is how hierarchies form. When you deprive others of observation, you flatten yourself into utility. The pressure environment you inhabit rewards those who make themselves easy to process. Algorithms favor clarity. Institutions favor compliance, masked as initiative. Relationships favor emotional labor disguised as connection. You are praised when you are smooth, responsive, predictable. You are corrected when you are opaque. The correction is rarely explicit. It comes as subtle exclusion, as mild irritation, as jokes about being hard to read. These signals are meant to train you back into legibility. If you accept the training, you will be liked. You will not be deferred to. Obedience today is maintained through the fear of friction. Friction threatens flow, and flow is treated as moral good. You have learned to equate harmony with safety, but harmony without tension is stagnation. It produces a surface calm under which resentment accumulates. You feel this resentment when you agree too quickly. When you soften boundaries before they are tested, it leaks out later as fatigue, as cynicism, as a vague sense that you are being used without malice. Malice is not required for extraction. Systems extract politely. Another reversal appears here. Those who create mild discomfort early often avoid major conflict later. Those who avoid all discomfort accumulate it internally until it poisons their judgment. I have watched councils dissolve, not because of disagreement, but because no one dared introduce friction soon enough. Silence, used too late, becomes withdrawal. Silence, used early, establishes terms. Consider a brief scene. Someone asks for your availability. Assuming immediacy, you would normally reply with options, explanations, apologies for imagined inconvenience. Instead, you respond, later, with fewer words. The insight is not that you have asserted dominance, but that you have reset tempo. Tempo is invisible power. Whoever controls tempo controls expectation. Your passivity has already trained others how to treat you. They do not wake each morning plotting to diminish you. They follow the patterns you have reinforced. When you are always accessible, access loses meaning. When you are always agreeable, agreement loses signal. When you are always clear, clarity loses authority. This is not punishment. It is adaptation. You have adapted yourself out of leverage. Internally, the cost sharpens. You begin to doubt your own seriousness. You wonder why others seem to move with less effort. You attribute it to confidence, to privilege, to luck. Rarely do you consider restraint. Restraint feels like absence. And absence scares you because it threatens invisibility. Yet invisibility is not the same as silence. Silence, when chosen, draws attention precisely because it interrupts pattern. Power beneath the surface operates through asymmetry. Not everyone knows what you know. Not everyone can reach you when they wish. Not every question receives an answer. This asymmetry is not announced. It is allowed. People sense it and adjust their behavior without understanding why. They become more careful. Carefulness is respect in its earliest form. Another small pattern. In conversation, you often nod to show understanding. Filling pauses with affirmation. Try withholding that signal. Let the other person continue without reinforcement. The reframing is subtle. You are not withdrawing interest. You are refusing to manage their comfort. You will notice how quickly people reveal what they assume you need to hear. Silence is an invitation, but not a safe one. I am often amused by how people accuse restraint of manipulation while forgiving constant persuasion. Persuasion is far more invasive. It seeks to shape outcome overtly. Restraint simply declines to participate fully. It leaves space for others to reveal themselves. In that revelation, leverage appears naturally. You may fear that this repositioning will isolate you. In truth, it filters. Those who only valued your availability will drift. Those who value your presence will adjust. Adjustment is costly. Only serious actors pay it. This is another reversal. Loss clarifies value more accurately than gain ever could. There is patience required here. And patience is misunderstood as passivity. Patience is active waiting. It observes without interfering. It allows pressure to build elsewhere. In Florence, I learned how patience outlasts force, because force must declare itself. Patience never does. It waits for imbalance to surface. A final daily pattern before you proceed further. You are tempted to correct misunderstandings immediately. You fear being misread. Allow one minor misinterpretation to persist without correction. Observe who compensates, who seeks clarity, who withdraws. The insight is stark. Those who care about accuracy will approach you. Those who rely on your self-correction will move on. Both outcomes serve you. As you continue this quiet shift, remember that mystery is not something you perform. It emerges when you stop overexposing intention. Unpredictability is not chaos. It is the byproduct of independence. You do not need to appear complex. You need only stop simplifying yourself for others. As this restraint settles, another layer of resistance appears, quieter but more persistent. It is the fear that without constant signaling, you will be forgotten. This fear is old. It predates your current environment. It comes from the mistaken belief that attention is sustained by motion. In reality, attention is sustained by interruption. What disappears is not the quiet presence, but the predictable one. When you reduce output, you do not vanish. You interrupt the rhythm others have learned to rely on. Interruption, force, recalculation. I have observed how people respond when a familiar pattern breaks. They search for explanation first. Then, for reassurance, when neither arrives, they supply their own meaning. This is where your value begins to rise without effort. Meaning assigned by others is more durable than meaning declared by you. You cannot argue yourself into importance. You can only allow others to encounter it indirectly. Another daily pattern reveals this. You are accustomed to closing conversations neatly, summarizing conclusions, so nothing is left unresolved. You do this to be helpful. The reframing is that unresolved space keeps you present after you leave. When everything is resolved, you are finished. When something lingers, you are remembered. This is not manipulation. It is recognition of how attention works when it is not managed aggressively. The pressure environment of this year continues to compress people toward immediacy. Everyone is urged to react, to clarify, to declare position. Silence is framed as evasion. Delay is framed as weakness. You feel this when someone follows up with unnecessary urgency. When tone sharpens because you did not respond fast enough. These signals are tests. They are not requests for information. They are probes for compliance. How quickly you neutralize the probe teaches others how to use it again. Obedience thrives on speed. When response is instant, there is no time for evaluation. You become an extension of another's timeline. Slowing down reclaims authorship of your own. This is why delay feels dangerous at first. It introduces uncertainty. Uncertainty unsettles those who depend on your predictability. Their discomfort is not your problem. It is evidence that a boundary has appeared where none existed. You may notice guilt rising when you do not explain. Guilt is a conditioned response. Is not a moral signal. It was installed to keep you smooth, accessible, manageable. The moment you feel it most strongly is often the moment you should remain silent. Guilt loses power when it is not rewarded with action. Each time you feel it and do nothing, it weakens. A reversal worth noting here. Those who apologize least are often assumed to have the most authority, even when they have done nothing to earn it. Apology invites evaluation. Evaluation invites hierarchy. When you apologize reflexively, you place yourself below an imagined standard. Silence refuses the comparison altogether. Consider a brief scenario. You are challenged indirectly, an insinuation, a raised eyebrow, a question that implies fault. You would normally defend, clarify, restore balance. Instead, you do not respond immediately. You let the implication exist without confirmation or denial. The reframing is crucial. You are not conceding. You are refusing to legitimize the frame. Often, the challenge dissolves when it is not fed. What remains is a faint awareness that you are not easily maneuvered. Internally, this shift restores something you may have lost. Self-command. When you no longer react automatically, you feel a separation between stimulus and response. In that space, judgment returns. You begin to notice how often you were being led by expectation rather than choice. This awareness can be unsettling. It exposes how much of your previous activity was reactive performance. Do not rush to correct this feeling. Let it sharpen. Reputationally, something subtle occurs. People begin to describe you differently, often without realizing it. You become harder to pin down, less available, more reserved. These descriptions carry mixed tone. Some will frame it as distance. Others will sense weight. Both are preferable to being described as always there or easy to talk to. Ease is rarely associated with authority. I have seen men lose influence not because they were wrong, but because they were too eager to be understood. They believed that misunderstanding was danger. In truth, misunderstanding is neutral. It becomes dangerous only when you rush to correct it. Because correction reveals anxiety. Anxiety invites pressure. Another daily pattern. You receive feedback you did not ask for. You would normally acknowledge it warmly. Explain how you will integrate it. Signal receptivity. Try a different approach. Receive it without elaboration. The reframing is that not all feedback requires assimilation. When you accept everything, nothing distinguishes you. Selectivity signals standards, even when those standards are unspoken. Silence also alters how you listen. When you are no longer preparing your next explanation, you hear structure instead of content. You notice who speaks to fill space and who speaks to move position. You notice when someone repeats themselves, when they escalate, when they retreat. These patterns were always present. You could not see them because you were busy maintaining flow. There is a quiet amusement in watching self-deception unfold when no one interrupts it. People reveal their assumptions quickly when they are not corrected. They show you what they think you need, what they think you lack, what they think will move you. This information is valuable precisely because it was not requested. You gain leverage, not by acting on it immediately, but by holding it. Patience here is not waiting for reward. It is allowing others to show their hand. Force compels reaction. Patience collects data. In Florence, I learned that those who waited longest often needed to act least. Their restraint did the work for them. You may worry that this approach risks being misjudged as indifference. Indifference is not your concern. Dependence is when people must work slightly to engage you. They attribute importance to the engagement itself. When engagement is effortless, it is consumed and forgotten. Another reversal appears. Those who fear losing connection often lose influence. Those who risk losing connection often gain clarity. Clarity simplifies choices. You no longer chase alignment. You allow it to approach. As this repositioning continues, you will feel moments of loneliness. This is not social loss. It is the withdrawal of constant affirmation. Affirmation is addictive. Its absence feels like deprivation. Do not confuse this with isolation. Isolation is imposed. What you are experiencing is autonomy. You will also notice how often people test the boundary you have quietly introduced. They will increase frequency, urgency, emotional tone. These are not signs of respect or disrespect. They are signs of recalibration. When a door that was always open becomes partially closed, people knock louder before they learn to knock less often. Do not interpret the knocking as failure. It is progress. A final pattern before the next shift. You are tempted to justify your restraint by inventing busyness, by offering reasons for your absence. Resist this. Explanation undermines the very asymmetry you are cultivating. Access that requires explanation is not access. It is apology disguised as schedule. You are not becoming cold. You are becoming deliberate. Deliberateness changes how time behaves around you. Others slow down or speed up in response. Either way, you are no longer moving at their pace by default. What remains is to recognize the final resistance. the most difficult because it masquerades as virtue. It is the belief that restraint must be justified by character, that if you do not explain yourself, others will assume the worst. This belief reveals how deeply you have internalized external judgment as a governing force. You imagine an invisible tribunal evaluating your silence. You forget that most people are occupied with managing their own exposure. Silence does not invite universal suspicion. It invites selective curiosity. Curiosity is unevenly distributed. Those who matter most tend to have it. Late in life, I noticed something that younger men could not accept. Reputation is shaped less by what you clarify than by what you decline to clarify. Declining to clarify signals that you trust your position enough to let misunderstanding exist. Trust in position reads as solidity. Solidity draws alignment more reliably than reassurance ever does. There is a daily moment where this becomes evident. You are asked why you made a certain choice. The question is framed politely, but it seeks justification. You would normally narrate your reasoning to appear fair and transparent. The reframing is that reasoning offered too freely lowers the perceived cost of challenging you. When you respond briefly, or not at all, you shift the cost back. The questioner must decide whether the answer is worth pursuing. Often, it is not. The environment you live in amplifies this effect. People are exhausted by constant explanation. They demand it reflexively, but they respect those who do not indulge the demand. Respect here is not admiration. It is recalibration of behavior. They speak differently to you. They phrase requests with more care. They hesitate before assuming agreement. These are not compliments. They are structural changes. You will see power reversals emerge quietly. The one who used to pressure you for immediate response now waits. The one who used to overshare to pull you closer now withholds to regain balance. The one who dismissed your boundaries as inflexibility now treats them as fact. None of this is negotiated. It is observed and adjusted to. Power, when real, does not announce itself. It alters behavior without discussion. Another reversal is internal. You begin to experience less urgency. When urgency fades, discernment sharpens. You notice which invitations carry substance and which carry obligation. Obligation drains. Substance concentrate. You choose differently without making a show of it. Others notice the absence of you more than the presence of your reasoning. A final daily pattern clarifies this. You are invited into a discussion already moving toward a conclusion. Previously, you would intervene, offering nuance to improve the outcome. Now you observe first. The insight is precise. Entering late with explanation rarely changes direction. It only associates you with the result. When you withhold, you preserve distance. Distance preserves leverage. I have watched men entangle themselves in outcomes they did not choose because they felt compelled to be helpful. Helpfulness is a seductive trap. It promises relevance while quietly eroding authority. Authority is not built by contribution alone. It is built by selectivity. Selectivity requires the willingness to let some things proceed without you. At this stage, restraint no longer feels like effort. It feels like alignment. You are not suppressing impulse. You are redirecting it inward. You speak when structure requires it, not when anxiety demands it. This distinction is subtle but decisive. Structure endures. Anxiety consumes. The cost you were paying for passivity becomes visible in contrast. Your internal contempt fades because you are no longer betraying your own judgment. Your options widen because you are not pre-committed by explanation. Your reputation stabilizes because it is no longer constantly updated. Stability reads as seriousness. You will notice fewer people demanding access. This is not loss. It is filtration. Those who remain engage differently. They approach with intent. Intentional engagement is rarer and more valuable than frequent contact. You did not create this by posturing. You created it by restraint. What remains is execution of a single internal action. Within 7 days, choose one recurring situation where you habitually explain yourself to prevent discomfort. In that situation, when the impulse to explain arises, do nothing, not outwardly, inwardly. Mark the moment and let it pass. Do not replace the explanation with another signal. Do not compensate later. Allow the interaction to end without closure. This action is private. No one needs to know you did it. It is measurable because you will feel the urge sharply and resist it once. It is irreversible because once you experience the outcome, how little collapses. When you withhold unnecessary explanation, you cannot unlearn it. From that point forward, silence will no longer feel like absence. It will feel like position.